President Trump has claimed an infamous Venezuelan gang, Tren de Aragua, is overwhelming police in multiple U.S. cities.
A Venezuelan gang that started from a failed railway project is now being called one of the most dangerous criminal networks in the world, and they've already made it to Times Square, New York.
This gang is terrorizing law-abiding citizens, including taking over multiple apartment complexes.
From building nightclubs inside prisons to ambushing U.S. police officers in broad daylight, Tren de Aragua's rise is unlike anything America has faced before. But wait until you hear how the U.S. responded with warships and a terrorist designation. That part will absolutely shock you.
The United States has carried out a strike against a drug-carrying vessel from Venezuela. Watch this. 11 gang members were on that boat in the southern Caribbean, and they were killed in a blast.
The deadly rise of Tren de Aragua. It began with a failed railway project that never left the ground. Around the mid-2000s, a group of Venezuelan workers hired for the railway found themselves with no construction to do and no steady income. Instead of drifting apart, they chose to stay together. But their bond quickly shifted into something darker. Small crimes like theft and robbery soon replaced their original labor, setting the stage for what would become the most feared criminal organization in Venezuela. The real transformation came when several members ended up inside a Venezuelan prison. Prisons there were already overcrowded, but what followed was almost unthinkable. The authorities, instead of maintaining firm control, turned over much of the power to the inmates themselves. Through corruption and neglect, the guards and officials allowed prisoners to govern their own system. This was not limited freedom. It was a complete handover of authority. Inside these walls, Tren de Aragua created what they called the Pranato system. At the top stood the Pran, a leader who functioned as both judge and ruler. He appointed lieutenants who in turn collected money, organized operations beyond the prison gates, and even charged fellow inmates a fee just to live. The rules were brutal. A former prisoner explained how extortion worked. Fail to pay once and your wrist would be shot. Refuse again and your ankle would take the bullet. Refuse a third time and the price was death. This method of violent taxation would eventually spread beyond prison walls and into communities, even reaching foreign soil where residents were forced to hand over protection payments. From their stronghold, Tren de Aragua ran drug smuggling and human trafficking while maintaining full control inside the prison. Ironically, government attempts to humanize prisons only gave more autonomy to these inmate leaders. By the time the gang had cemented power, Tocaron prison had become their headquarters, a fortress where they built a criminal empire shielded from state interference. But who was the mind behind this empire? His name was Hector Rustenford Guerrero Flores, better known as Niño Guerrero. Born in 1983 in Maracay, the capital of Aragua State, his path was carved step by step into violence. His early years were marked by petty theft, but in the year 2000 he began climbing toward far darker crimes. 5 years later, he orchestrated an attack on a police station, killing Corporal Oswaldo Gonzalez. That act pushed him firmly into the ranks of the most dangerous men in Venezuela. By 2010, authorities captured him for drug dealing, placing him inside the Aragua Penitentiary Center. At that time, his group was still modest in size, yet under his leadership, what started as a small gang multiplied in reach and power. Even behind bars, Guerrero's strategies expanded their operations, transforming Tren de Aragua from a prison gang into an international syndicate feared across borders. How did a failed railway project turn into a sprawling network of violence and power? And how did one man rise from the streets of Maracay to become the architect of Venezuela's most notorious criminal group? The answers lie in corruption, fear, and a system that allows criminals to rule from the inside out. Venezuela's prison empire of crime. By the year 2018, Tren de Aragua had already swelled to more than 2,000 members, spreading its reach with terrifying speed. Local gangs that attempted to stand in their way were not just defeated but systematically erased. This was more than a turf war. It was about demonstrating complete control through violence so shocking that even hardened criminals dared not oppose them. Officials who studied the gang's leader, Héctor Guerrero, spoke of him as a man with such disregard for human life that he seemed almost impossible to stop. When the Venezuelan government finally attempted to regain control, the scale of the challenge stunned the nation. Authorities launched Operation Gran Cacique Guaycaipuro, targeting 7 prisons, including the group's headquarters at Tocoron. The mission was supposed to dismantle the Pranado system and restore state authority. But when security forces entered, what they discovered left even veteran officers speechless. Inside the prison was not the bleak and broken environment most expected. It had been transformed. Venezuelan citizens outside the walls struggled to find food, while gang members inside had restaurant service and nightclub entertainment. A private zoo held exotic animals. Underground tunnels with lighting and ventilation stretched beyond the prison perimeter. The discoveries did not stop at leisure and comfort. The most disturbing find came in the form of weapons. After the raid, security forces uncovered caches of military-grade equipment. Hundreds of thousands of rounds of ammunition, anti-tank munitions, C4 explosives, and rocket-propelled grenades. This was not the crude weaponry of prisoners carving blades from scrap metal. This was the kind of arsenal capable of arming a small army, all hidden inside a facility meant for correction. To retake the compound, the government deployed 11,000 security personnel. That is the size of 2 military brigades sent against a single prison. And yet, even with such overwhelming force, the outcome was far from a clean victory. In 2023, Guerrero escaped along with 500 prisoners. The operation designed to crush the gang instead scattered its leadership and members across South America. Within months, intelligence would confirm cells operating in 8 countries, including the United States. Expansion through collapse. Oil prices collapsed from $140 per barrel in the early 2000s to below $30 by 2016. The Venezuelan government printed money to cover the gap, sending inflation soaring. By 2012, families began fleeing. Within 6 years, over 3 million Venezuelans had crossed borders seeking stability. Today, almost 8 million have left, roughly 28% of the nation's population. But amid this mass migration, another force was quietly on the move. For Tren de Aragua, Venezuela's most powerful criminal syndicate, the collapse was both a threat and an opening. Their income from local operations had dropped, and the group needed a new path forward. They found it hidden inside the same migration flows that carried desperate families out of the country. While millions were searching for safety, Tren de Aragua saw an opportunity to expand their network into new territories. Today, almost 8 million Venezuelans have fled their homeland. Most are innocent people escaping hunger and repression. Many openly resent the gang for dragging their nation's name through the mud. Yet the criminals slipped across borders alongside them, embedding themselves in countries across Latin America and eventually reaching the United States. The consequences are now being felt in places where few expected them. From the crowded streets of New York City to quiet suburbs in Middle America, violence once confined to Venezuela has arrived on new doorsteps. The question is no longer how the gang survived the crisis, but how far they intend to go. Tren de Aragua's arrival in the United States. It began in a place no one expected. In 2023, Chicago became the first American city where authorities confirmed the presence of Tren de Aragua. What followed would show how fast this gang could move, and how ruthless they were willing to be once they set foot on new ground. Within just a year of being identified, their name was tied to shocking crimes. The killing of a police officer in Florida and the murder of Laken Riley, a 22-year-old nursing student. Riley was killed while jogging at the University of Georgia in February 2024. Jose Ibarra, charged with her murder, was later confirmed by Department of Homeland Security sources as a Tren de Aragua member. For investigators, this was not the slow buildup usually seen when international gangs enter the United States. It was sudden, violent, and carried out with precision, leaving law enforcement scrambling to catch up. So what makes Tren de Aragua different from the gangs already operating in America? According to a former director with United States Immigration and Customs Enforcement, their methods stand apart. The official explained that their use of violence, especially through extortion and assaults, far exceeds what is normally seen. Unlike most gangs that try to avoid attention, Tren de Aragua does the opposite. They show no concern about being noticed by police and make little effort to hide their activities. That defiance has reached a disturbing level. Intelligence reports revealed that leaders of the gang recently approved direct attacks on police officers. For most organized groups, targeting law enforcement is considered too risky. It invites heavy crackdowns and federal investigations. But for Tren de Aragua, the rules are different. Remember, their roots trace back to Venezuelan prisons where intimidation and brutality shaped their rise. Violence is not just a tool for them, it is the foundation of their survival. And now, those same rules are being written onto American streets. Tren de Aragua's growing grip on America. The reach of Tren de Aragua has grown so wide that even officials in Washington are paying close attention. A recent Homeland Security memo revealed that the gang has spread into at least 16 states from California and Nevada across to Maryland and Delaware. Reports have already confirmed activity in places like Colorado, Tennessee, and New York, making it clear that their operations are no longer limited to isolated pockets. In Colorado, their tactics shocked entire neighborhoods. Residents in Aurora began speaking of armed men patrolling apartment complexes as if they owned them. Security footage later confirmed those fears, showing gang members knocking on doors and demanding protection money, disguised as extra rent. Those who dared to resist faced brutal consequences. Several tenants were stabbed, sending waves of fear through the community and forcing some families to abandon their homes altogether. The same pattern soon appeared in New York, only on a much larger scale. Authorities confirmed that Tren de Aragua was recruiting heavily from migrant shelters, embedding themselves in all 5 boroughs. City officials warned that the gang's sudden rise could fuel a spike in robberies, assaults, and knife attacks across the city. Then came the incident that pushed them into national headlines. 2 police officers responding to a disorderly conduct call in Times Square were ambushed by roughly 14 gang members. The officers were beaten and kicked in plain view of stunned bystanders. 7 suspects were taken into custody, yet to the shock of many, all were released without bail. That decision sparked outrage and raised urgent questions about deportation policies and whether authorities were prepared for what might come next. Behind the scenes, law enforcement now fears something even more dangerous. Federal officials warn that Tren de Aragua may try to align with groups like MS-13 to expand their drug trade. If that happens, the consequences could spread far beyond city streets. Tren de Aragua's method of fear and profit. Fear spreads quickly when a criminal network finds new ways to profit from violence, and Tren de Aragua has mastered that strategy. Their presence in the United States is not only about numbers, but about how they operate. One of their most effective methods is deceptively simple. Members walk the streets, grabbing phones or purses directly from people's hands. What may seem like a random robbery is actually part of a larger system. Within minutes, those devices are used to drain entire bank accounts through fake transactions that move money between the United States and South America. Once emptied, the phones are shipped to Colombia, where they are resold for additional profit. It is a business model built on speed, intimidation, and international connections. Yet theft and fraud are only the surface of their reach. The violence they bring to American soil mirrors the brutality that made them infamous across Latin America. In Texas, a man who worked with the gang paid the ultimate price. He was abducted along with his 2 children. While the kids were spared, he was executed with a bullet to the back of his head and left on the roadside. Acts like this are not random. They are calculated moves to cement control. Once cells of the gang settled in the United States, they began carving out space in local criminal economies. Their method of sending a message was as chilling as it was effective. Rivals sometimes found dismembered bodies delivered to their doorsteps, packed inside trash bags. Even police officers have not been spared. In Queens, New York, 2 officers came under fire. One survived only because his protective vest absorbed the bullet. Authorities now see this as a dangerous escalation. How does a gang compete in crowded drug markets? By showing it is willing to be more ruthless than anyone else. One woman in another case endured a terrifying ordeal. She was tied up, pistol whipped, and told her fingers would be cut off if she did not cooperate. Jewelry worth thousands was stolen, but the scars left behind were far deeper. America's struggle with a rising gang threat. Federal authorities had already made close to 200 arrests tied to the Tren de Aragua by December of 2024, spread across 22 states. But gang experts warned this only scratched the surface. What complicated matters further was the ongoing fight over sanctuary cities. a debate so political that it created cracks between local jurisdictions and federal agencies. Those cracks gave the gang the perfect cover to expand. An immigration officer speaking under the condition of anonymity explained that in sanctuary states and cities, information simply stops flowing. Local police can arrest gang members, but immigration authorities never receive the details. Without detainers, suspects often slip back onto the streets, and officials have no clear picture of how widespread the network has become. That lack of data leaves communities vulnerable, with the problem always one step ahead of the system. Residents living inside those neighborhoods do not need statistics to understand the danger. In New York City, one longtime night worker warned a visiting content creator to keep his guard up. He described frequent robberies and said the safest choice was to hand over valuables and walk away. He stressed that these men were not bluffing, that he had seen people cut open and beaten senseless. Coming from someone who grew up around organized crime in the city, he added that even the old mob never unleashed the kind of reckless violence now on display. As Tren de Aragua expanded into both large metropolitan centers and smaller towns, the reality set in that this was no longer a local policing issue. The scope of their reach, combined with their brutality, left no doubt about the threat they posed. The real question became whether the United States government was prepared to escalate its response before the group's foothold grew into something impossible to uproot. America declares war on Tren de Aragua. The moment came when pretending Tren de Aragua was just another criminal outfit was no longer possible. Investigations by Homeland Security revealed that more than 1,000 of its members were already operating inside the United States. That number may seem small compared to America's population, but criminologists have long noted a troubling pattern. A small fraction of offenders, often around 5%, can account for half of the crime in a community. Apply that math to Tren de Aragua, and the picture becomes chilling. A compact but ruthless organization was able to destabilize entire regions through a mix of violence, fear, and precision. This was not simply a nuisance for police to manage. It was an organized, disciplined, and ruthless force equipped with weapons far beyond what most gangs carry. They had the structure of a transnational crime network and the audacity to confront law enforcement head-on. Could the nation continue treating them as if they were street-level troublemakers, or was a different approach required? The response came on January 20th, 2025, President Trump's first day of his second term. He signed an executive order initiating the designation of Tren de Aragua and other criminal organizations as foreign terrorist organizations. The designation officially took effect on February 20th, 2025, making them the first South American gang to receive this classification. The impact of such a move was immediate. Any known member of the gang was now subject to the toughest immigration laws. They became inadmissible, deportable, and barred from any form of legal status. Sanctuary cities could no longer shield them because federal counterterrorism laws overpowered local rules. If someone tied to the group was arrested, immigration and customs enforcement requests had to be honored. The loopholes that had once allowed the gang to slip through cracks in the system were suddenly gone. But Washington did not stop at paperwork and designations. The strategy escalated into something far more aggressive, crossing into the realm of military power. On the 2nd of September 2025, American forces struck a boat in the southern Caribbean. Intelligence suggested the vessel was carrying gang members involved in narcotics trafficking. The strike destroyed the boat and left 11 dead. This operation was not isolated. It unfolded as part of a wider naval buildup in the region. The United States deployed 3 Aegis-class destroyers, the USS Gravely, the USS Jason Dunham, and the USS Sampson. Alongside them came additional warships carrying 4,500 personnel, including more than 2,000 Marines, focused on counter-narcotics missions. The message was unmistakable. Tren de Aragua was no longer seen as an issue for police departments or local courts to handle. The United States government had elevated them to the level of a national security threat. And when Washington defines you as that kind of enemy, history shows the response will not be limited to arrests and indictments. It will involve power, reach, and resources that only the military can provide. Arrests and deportations. The fight against Tren de Aragua took a dramatic turn in Texas during the fall of 2024. An apartment complex was raided, leading to the arrest of 20 members of the Tren de Aragua. The group had occupied a vacant building and they had used threats and intimidation to control it. Once inside, they transformed it into a base for drug and trafficking operations. This was a strategy they had repeated in other places before law enforcement caught on. But the crackdown did not stop there. By March of 2025, the net widened with a coordinated federal operation that struck at the heart of the gang's American presence. One of the most notable arrests was that of Jesus Miguel Barreto Lazama, a 29-year-old Venezuelan national who had settled in Houston, Texas. Authorities charged him with conspiring to bring more than 5 kilograms of cocaine into the United States from Venezuela and Colombia. His role was not minor. Investigators described him as a central figure who had orchestrated shipments which revealed his leadership within Tren de Aragua's drug network. At the same time, another blow was dealt hundreds of miles away in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Briley Jesus Balera Farias, a 32-year-old Venezuelan, was taken into custody and charged alongside Lazama. Their simultaneous arrests sent a clear signal. The United States was now targeting not just street-level operatives but the men believed to be running major parts of the organization. What came next stirred even greater debate. In March of that same year, the Trump administration invoked the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, attempting to deport more than 130 Venezuelan men accused of gang ties. They were to be sent to El Salvador's Center for Terrorism Confinement. The law had not been used this way before since it was designed during wartime against foreign nations. The move led to a legal challenge. On September 2, 2025, a federal appeals court ruled there was not enough evidence to classify Tren de Aragua as an invading force. The decision blocked the administration's attempt, but deportations are still moving forward under regular immigration laws. The impact, however, is clear. The United States has signaled that it sees Tren de Aragua as a direct threat, and the battle against them is far from over. The battle for control. Operation Summer Heat, launched by the FBI in 2025, deployed over 100 personnel in coordination with local and federal partners. The mission extended beyond arrests to dismantling drug trafficking channels, seizing illegal firearms, and pursuing gang members across multiple states. Authorities have said this is not just about fighting crime, but about adjusting to a new category of threat that calls for new strategies. The administration expanded its efforts even further. Through the Department of Homeland Security, Joint Task Force Alpha widened its reach beyond the southwest and maritime borders, extending operations to the northern frontier as well. This task force brings together state, federal, and local agencies to specifically target smuggling and human trafficking tied to Tren de Aragua. Meanwhile, Congress stepped in to back these moves. On June 24th of 2025, a House Committee on Homeland Security member representative introduced the Tren de Aragua Border Security Threat Assessment Act. The proposed measure would require Homeland Security to produce a full report on the gang's activities along United States borders and create a clear plan of action. But what makes dismantling the gang so difficult? The problem goes beyond arrests. Like the infamous MS-13, Tren de Aragua members are easily identified by their tattoos, which cover large portions of their bodies. These markings once made them stand out, allowing police to track them more effectively. Yet the gang has adapted. Leaders now instruct new recruits to avoid tattoos altogether, making it harder for authorities to identify them. The fight has also spread internationally. Tren de Aragua is active in 11 Mexican states where they work with groups like Unión Topito in trafficking people and distributing drugs. The United States designation of the gang as a foreign terrorist organization has put pressure on Mexican authorities to respond more forcefully. At the same time, Venezuela's reaction has been openly hostile. President Nicolás Maduro threatened consequences if the United States continued its aggressive stance, even raising the possibility of military conflict. But how much weight do his words carry? Maduro has claimed to command a militia of 4.5 million members. On paper, that would mean almost 16% of the nation's population is part of a fighting force ready to defend him. Independent assessments, however, put Venezuela's population between 26 and 28 million people and dismiss his militia claims as unrealistic. Analysts say the actual figure is closer to 100,000, with most of them poorly armed. In contrast, United States military strength far outmatches Venezuela's. As one expert put it, when the time comes, only a single destroyer would be needed, and the United States has already deployed 3. The battle to erase Tren de Aragua from America. The weight of money can crush an empire as easily as bullets. That is the angle the United States has taken against Venezuela, stripping away hundreds of millions of dollars in assets linked to Nicolás Maduro. Bank accounts, private jets, and cash reserves worth $700 million were seized. A move aimed not only at hurting the regime, but also at destabilizing the network that allowed Tren de Aragua to expand across borders. In addition, a bounty was placed on the president for information leading to his arrest. Economic pressure has become as vital as military force in this fight. Inside Washington, the Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control placed sanctions not only on Tren de Aragua, but also on the Cartel de los Soles, a network within Venezuela's military long accused of protecting drug traffickers. By freezing assets and blocking any United States business from working with them, the sanctions aim to choke off the financial lifelines that kept these organizations alive. Support for this approach has crossed party lines, a rare show of unity in American politics. Yet not everything is straightforward. The debate over Tren de Aragua's actual United States presence remains contentious. Some analysts argue the gang's American operations are more fragmented than their Venezuelan empire. Opportunistic cells rather than unified command. Critics suggest the threat may be inflated to justify broader immigration policies. Institutions in the United States are far from perfect, but they remain capable of mobilizing resources on a scale that criminal networks cannot match. Tren de Aragua grew out of Venezuela's broken system, thriving in the gaps left by poverty and corruption. Yet every move into new territory also invites greater resistance. In the United States, the fight is not just about gangs, it is about proving whether institutions can hold firm against a threat that once seemed unstoppable. The question that now hangs over this fight is not whether the cartel will be beaten, but how swiftly its presence on United States soil can be erased. This clash is still unfolding, and its outcome will shape more than just one gang's future. If you want to stay updated as this story develops, subscribe and join us for the next breakdown. The fight against Tren de Aragua is far from over, and the next chapter may be even more revealing. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.